Good evening and welcome to Wellness Matters, brought to you by the American Hospital in Dubai. We strive to give you a comprehensive look at a number of wellness and health-related issues every week, and we welcome your questions in the live chat on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram, so don't be shy. Every question matters. Whether you are in a relationship or not, I think you are going to enjoy tonight's episode. What makes a happy couple, and how can you nurture your relationship so that you grow together and not apart? Tonight, we are going to address all these questions and more to Dr. Kareen E Bekhazi, who's a clinical psychologist at the American Hospital in Dubai. She also has a Doctor of Psychology degree from California Southern University and is a member of the American Psychological Association. Dr. Bekhazi, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you so much for having me, but please I'd rather go by Kareen. Doctor is very heavy for me. Still.
Okay, then Kareen it is. Kareen, before we start, let's tell the viewers a little bit more about you. You have around 9 years of experience working in this field in Dubai, and your specialties include addictive disorders and couples therapy. So we look forward to benefiting from your experience tonight.
Thank you very much.
Are you ready for the weekly round of 10 quick questions?
I sure am.
So what attracted you initially to the field of psychology and specifically clinical psychology?
Human behavior.
And what is your biggest career achievement?
I was working with the UNODC, Office of Drugs and Crimes. I was training people to deliver substance abuse treatment all over the world.
Do you think there's a stigma around mental health in the Middle East?
For sure.
And how do you think we can destigmatize this?
Education and awareness.
What cases do you treat the most?
In Dubai, it's anxiety disorders.
Tonight we will discuss relationships. So what makes a happy couple in 3 words?
Empathy, active listening, and validation.
And what is the #1 reason couples come to you for therapy?
Relational distress.
Once you see a couple, can you tell immediately whether they're going to make it through or not?
Yes.
And what traits are usually hard to reform and can break a couple up?
If the couple doesn't want to work on the relationship. That's the only traits.
So can you give us some words of wisdom for everyone listening tonight?
Don't wait until you're in distress to come and see me.
Well, that was very informative, Kareen, and I look forward to going into all the details during tonight's episode. But you mentioned that there's a stigma around mental health in the Middle East. And in the region, in general, around the world. So how can we destigmatize this?
Well, actually, let's talk a little bit about the Middle East. There was a research in 2019 about, it was called the Young Arab Survey, and the outcome of the research shows that 66% of people actually want to seek help, but don't find the right resources. I think the mental health stigma revolves around a lot around being crazy. Seeking help means that you are crazy. There is a fear of saying things that might not be held in confidentiality. So I think that the way to destigmatize it is to normalize it. Mental health at the end of the day is a normal reaction to abnormal events. So if things that are happening in someone's life are difficult to manage, then definitely the way we're going to react is with distress. And I think people need to know that. And you don't need to really be suffering from mental disorder for you to come and see a psychologist. So there are mental disorders, there are emotional issues, and you're definitely not crazy. I think people tend to mix being crazy and having issues, which actually is never really the case, because you're never crazy. It's just you can reach a point where you completely break down, and this is where you need help.
Now, tonight's episode, we're going to focus on couples therapy. So that also carries a stigma with it, because a lot of couples don't want others to know that they're coming for therapy. So how can we make our viewers more relaxed towards the topic, and what is your advice?
Well, I think that the stigma for couple therapy is actually therapy itself. I think that throughout my experience and what I have learned, that people have a tendency, or couples specifically have a tendency to think that they have to have the perfect relationship, and that if they are seeking help, this means that they are failing and that they don't know what to do. So basically, in couple therapy, we're really not fixing assumptions. We are actually guiding people into growth. And this is what couples need to understand. And couple therapy is not really a therapy that has to do with one person or one partner or the other partner. It has to do really with the space that is created when two people pick each other. Mm-hmm. So if I'm in a relationship with somebody, this person and myself, the relationship is the space that we both create together. And this is the space that gets contaminated through with time, with our own emotional injuries. And when we come to therapy, it's actually a process of self-growth for the therapy, for the relation itself, mm-hmm. not for the partner specifically.
Now, Kareen, before we talk about the details of therapy, let's just discuss very quickly the different stages of a relationship. Mm. Because obviously you're infatuated maybe at the beginning when yes. you meet a new person.
Yes. So basically, there are several ways to discuss this point. But if you want to talk about relationship, there are mainly 4 stages. The first stage is romantic love. Romantic love is a combination of friendship and passion. And it's really a hormonal stage where you have, the testosterone level, you have the dopamine level that is really sky high, you have the serotonin level, which is the pleasure hormone, which is sky high, you have the vasopressin, which is sky high. So it's really a hormonal experience. And this is what we call romantic love. Now, after romantic love comes what we call commitment. Commitment is when, okay, you fall in love with somebody, you're infatuated, and infatuation is very unconscious. So the target of couple therapy is to move from unconscious to conscious, so from infatuation to real love. Mm-hmm. But in order for us to get there, we're moving through stages. So then after romantic love, you have power struggle or commitment. Commitment is when you decide you want to marry somebody, or you want to commit, or you want to take you want to go to the extra to the next level. This is where power struggle happens. After that, or during this period, we have what you call exits. Now, there are several kinds of exits which we will discuss, throughout tonight's episode. After the exit, you have like a loss of connection. And after loss of connection, then we have recommitment. And this is where couple actually move from unconscious to conscious, from infatuation to love.
Okay, so we're going to discuss these obviously later on during the episode, but let's start first with what does a typical therapy session for a couple look like? The first time a couple comes over to have a session, what happens?
Now, usually it's very important to, of course, make the couple feel very comfortable, because usually when they come to couple therapy, and unfortunately it's because this is the last resort. So it's usually one of the two who pushes for the appointment. Mm-hmm. Most often it's the woman. Why it's the woman, we will talk about it a little bit later. So when I have a couple in my office the first time, what's very important for me is to make sure that both know that I am not on someone's side versus another person's side, because what happens most often is that I could be seeing the woman, and the woman might be having relational distress, because 70% of people who come to me is because of relational distress. So, and then I make sure to explain, how things are. There's a lot of psychoeducation that goes on. So basically what I would say is something like, okay, the space that, between you have been contaminated with a lot of negativity. And the target of our session is to remove this negativity and try to add some positivity. And I explain to them, the way our brain processes this information, that in order for us to have a healthy relationship, we need to be able to communicate frontal cortex to frontal cortex, because what happens usually is that we are always guarded, and when we communicate, we don't really communicate. And I go through the process of educating the couple on what is going to be happening in the context of a relationship. And I usually don't talk much. I'm actually the coach. I'm just a coach. The role that I have in couple therapy is very different than the role that I have in individual therapy. So I'm there just to teach them how to be in the present, because this is what we need. When you are in the present, then the anxiety is decreased, we're more focused, we're more able to listen, we're more able to develop our own sense of self with regard to this other person with whom we are.
Now, obviously you see a lot of couples, but what are the main issues that couples come to you in order to work on?
Now, there are several issues. Mainly, they come in with, let's say, affairs, addictions, or relational distress that arise from, day-to-day chaotic tasks, distress, difficulty managing situations, in-laws. We are in this part of the world, we marry into the whole family, so there are always issues that arise from those kinds of interactions, from expectations that are not met. And really, in my opinion, and this is my own personal opinion, is we really know nothing about relationships. We have not been trained and we have not been raised to understand the essence of what is needed to make a couple successful. And what we know is not really the reality of what it is.
So now that you mentioned that, I have to ask you, what makes a successful couple then?
A successful couple, actually, very simply put, is a good relationship with ourselves.
Can you elaborate on that?
Yes. Basically, when we are in a relationship, the partner mirrors us. So if I'm in a relationship with somebody, this person is mirroring me. And if I don't have a good relationship with myself, let's say if I abuse myself, if I don't take care of myself, then I am telling the other partner or the other person how I want to be treated. And so the other person, if I don't take care of myself, the other person will not take care of me. And a very usual example that is very silly, but that I always give to my clients is like, okay, let's assume that, we're together and I like to sleep with the lights off. And that, however, you, my husband or whoever, like to read every night. So what I do, because I love you so much and I want to please you all the time, is that I'm going to tell you, listen, it's fine. I will, try to sleep with the lights on as long as you have your reading. So the first day, my husband's going to say, thank you very much. The second day, okay. The third day, fine. The fifth day or the 10th day, if the lights are off, my partners will turn the lights on. But if my partners know that I cannot sleep unless the lights are off, and he knows that for a fact, because I will not, make any, I will not let this go, then when the lights are on, the partner will turn the light off. So the way I treat myself will determine how my partner will treat me.
But this can also be interpreted in a way that you're being nice. It's something you can handle. It's not something that really annoys you maybe so much, and that you can do it as a nice gesture to your partner.
Exactly, but those nice gestures are gestures that we maintain, because we are raised to believe that the more we give and the more we give and the more we give, then the more we're going to get, the more we're going to get, the more we're going to get. And if I actually ask anyone, have you ever gotten the same amount of love, of appreciation that you actually gave? The answer will most definitely be no.
True, even though probably maybe the other partner would see that he's also or she's also giving the same amount back.
Exactly.
So is lack of communication the number one reason couples reach a stressful situation where they would need therapy? Is it lack of communication? And can we define it? Okay. Explain it.
Actually, lack of communication is the biggest myth. There is no such a thing as lack of communication in relations. There is one thing that is important, because you have those great communicators who cannot really understand each other. It's actually what is being triggered in communication, and how much we are triggered by what is being said. And I think this is the key that we don't understand. Now, in relationships, usually when we communicate, when we want to talk, we're very attentive to our own fears. Now, we are afraid not to have the love that we want. We are worried not to be getting the attention that we need. And so basically, when we are communicating, we are listening to our fears, and we are preparing to answer, and we are preparing to be defensive, and we are preparing to be blaming and shaming. And depending on the attachment style that the person has, so in a relationship, basically you have the pursuer and the withdrawer, and this goes back to the attachment style, which we can summarize briefly.
Let's do that, because I think if we're going to refer to it, people are not going to know what we're talking about.
Yeah, I don't want to get very technical.
No, we're not going to get technical.
Okay,
but
so basically, the attachment styles refers to the way you were treated as a child, and this goes to the first 2 years of life. So if I had a mother who was always, and mainly related to the primary caretaker, which is the mother. So if I had a mother who was always available to me, then I would have a secure attachment. If I had a mother who was not always available to me, then I will have an ambivalent attachment. If I had a mother who was totally absent, then I will have an avoidant attachment. And this is all, and so this is all embodied in us. So basically, we take those experiences that we have as kids as true, because there is no cognition at this point in time. And we take it as our own truth. So this is the way we relate to the world. So for someone who is ambivalent, and most likely most of the time it's us women who are ambivalent. So when we feel that we are not being loved the way that we want to be loved, then we have a tendency to pursue and to ask for things, and to want things, and to tell our partners, listen, we're doing this and we're doing that, and you're not responsive. But what we are doing is actually shaming and blaming the partner, who is actually avoidant in nature. So what is the partner going to do? He's going to pull back. And what are we going to do? Because we're waiting for the partner to come and try to reconcile, then we're going to lash out, and then the partner is going to move away, and then we're going to lash out, and then the partner is going to move away. So basically, when we have this combination of pursuer, withdrawer in communication, then the withdrawer is going to withdraw, and the pursuer is going to want to just fix things all the time. And this is where we get into a disastrous situation, because we're not in a safe space when each person actually can talk. What we need to understand in therapy is that my perception is true for me, and my partner's perception is true for him. And those perceptions are real, and those two realities do coexist. And this is why we need to teach validation and empathy, and this can only come through active listening, which is actually the only thing I do when I'm with couples, is just teach them how to be in the present and to park aside everything else that is preoccupying their mind. And this is where it's very important to learn mindfulness techniques, because when we are, so there are 3 parts to the brain. There is the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for decision making, for elaborating certain things, and there is the mammalian brain, which exists in all mammals, and then you have the reptilian brain, which is the old brain, and this is where all our childhood injuries are stored. So when you are in the context of relationship, the closer we get to the person, and this is after commitment, then the more scared we are, and the more we scrutinize the world around us for what is threatening, and we project onto the partner our own childhood wounds, and the partner automatically, what is he going to do? He's going to pull back or pursue.
So what's the solution? How can we reach the middle ground?
Therapy, therapy, therapy.
Okay, but if you're, let's say, a couple where you don't need, you're not so far to need therapy, and you're not in a situation that's really bad, how can you actually just nurture your relationship so that you don't reach the stressful part whereby you can't solve it by yourself?
Then I run out of a job. I can't tell you this. No, actually, we
just briefly, because a lot of couples are actually, maybe they argue, they have communication issues, But they do love each other very much, and there aren't really the big issues that would need to be worked through. So how do you decrease the tension?
It's very important in the context of a relationship to maintain a strong sense of self. Now, and to be authentic, and to be appreciative, and to be consistent with the way we manage our emotions. Now, we say that couples will go to couple therapy when they are in distress. Actually, what is important to understand is that, you know, if you have a brand new car that you really like and that you love, you know, you're not going to wait until the car is rusted for you to take it to wash it. So it's a continuous work. It's work in progress. And I think what people need to understand, that what heals a relationship is the relationship itself. So conflict is an opportunity for growth. We consider conflict as an opportunity for growth. A marriage with no conflict is a marriage that is failed. What we focus on is basically the way you treat yourself will determine how your partner treats you. And this is where we need to focus more on what we want. In a relationship, we have to set an intention, we have to set ways to be able to reach our intention. What's very important also to keep in mind is to make sure that the partner we are with is there for us. Are we being seen? Are we chosen? Are we wanted? So that we decrease the level of anxiety that we have from our childhood injuries, because we all have childhood injuries. Fear of being abandoned, fear of being neglected, fear of being cheated on, we have a lot of fears, and those fears will only come out in the context of a relationship, because the closer the person is to us. It's like when you are looking at a mirror. When you look at a mirror so closely, you see you see things bigger, and this is exactly what happens when you are with your partner.
How do you differentiate between self-love and selfishness? Yeah. Because there are selfish partners as well.
Well, self-love is completely different than selfishness. Self-love, you actually need self-love in order for you to blossom in a relationship. Because the more you are able to provide yourself with basic things and not rely on the other person to give you what you want, then you are more available. When you are not expecting the other person to give you what you can give yourself, then you are more available and you are actually less selfish. And this goes back to the way we are raised, because when we are in the womb before we are born, so there is the I and there is the self. When we are kids or children or even, you know, infants, the I is confused with the mother. So so the I and mom are the same. So I look at mom to give the self primary basic needs. When I grow up, I detach from the I, so the I becomes me. But the way I treat myself has a lot to do with the way my mom treated me. And so eventually, I will tend to talk to myself the way my mom talked to me. So if my mom was abusive or critical or absent or overly protective or gave me a lot of freedom, this will affect the way I will look at myself and will affect the way I will relate to others, because there is a very fine line between. So what we need in order to have a secure attachment is a balance of freedom and safety. So if I give my child a lot of freedom, then my child will feel ambivalent, because, you know, he or she wouldn't know what to do because there's a lot of freedom. If I give my child a lot of safety, then my child will feel that there is going to be an emotional crack that's going to happen, and my child is going to have a tendency to be avoidant eventually in relationships. So raising kids is a very big responsibility.
Okay, now I'm starting to reassess how I'm raising my own kids.
Yeah, I know. This is what happened to me when I started to take this course.
Okay, I think now we're making people worry about how to raise their kids. Now, some issues that couples face are really difficult to overcome. And for example, affairs. They ruin the trust between the two partners at the very least. Not to mention how hurtful they are. Sure. So when someone like that comes to you, how can you work through such a big issue in order to restore trust?
Well, first of all, it's very important to acknowledge that when people come to you, then there is something there that needs to, there's still something there. Now, in the context of relationship, there are exits, as I said before. So there are exits that are not very difficult, that are easy, that are important. So because when we get married, our initial understanding is that you're going to be in a home with no doors, with nothing, and I'm going to love you forever, and we're going to live happily ever after. Of course, this is not true, because those hormones will deplete after a while, and then we're going to have to, you know, go back to what is natural. So there are exits that we call primary, which is, you know, you spend more time at work, you start to do more of the things that you like, you go to the gym more often, you go out with friends, and those are healthy and normal. And then we have catastrophic exits, which are, you know, mental illnesses, and I'm talking really heavy stuff, addictions, affairs. And when this happens, it's actually when when there is a disengagement from self, when there is a disconnection, so we are stuck in a place of fear, we're no longer connected, and because we are relational beings, then we really would like to compensate for that. And there is what we called terminal exits, which is divorce, suicide, homicide, hopefully. You know, I mean, thank God we don't see a lot of that.
I'm happy to hear that. We are going to talk a little bit about divorce, but you mentioned at the beginning that you can tell immediately if a couple is going to make it or not. What are the signs?
Well, actually, if a couple is in therapy, then and if they are willing to practice what they are being taught, then they're 100% they'll make it.
And when is divorce advisable, let's say?
When one of the partners doesn't want to work on the relationship.
Okay.
Like if I'm in a relationship and the things are not going well, no matter what the story is, definitely there are situations that are more difficult and more difficult to accept and to overcome. But it's only when one person doesn't not want to work on the relationship that the relationship is over. Other than that, there are no other possibilities. So we can always be in relationship and we can make the best of it if we work on it.
But where do the children factor in? So sometimes we hear that it's better for the children, for the couple to actually divorce because they're constantly hearing arguments, fighting. They are living in an unhappy household. So in that case, would you say is that an example of when it would be also better to get a divorce?
Well, it's a tricky question because actually, you know, commitment in a relationship is the enemy and the best thing that can happen in a relationship. So when you have kids, the couple feels stuck. Now there are several research that came up with regards to that. So if there is an amicable divorce, first of all, it's very important to emphasize that kids, no matter how old they are, will feel that there is something going on in the relationship. No matter if you hide it, you fight you know, far from them, they will feel it. They will feel it in their somewhere. Now, depending on the child, on the age of the child.
Yes.
So having said that, if we have an amicable divorce, children will be okay. If we have a home with conflict, children will be, as I mentioned earlier, because, you know, you are teaching children certain, you know, things that they will, you know, also teach their own kids, then this is not okay. And if the couple manages to work on their relationship, and, you know, of course, the kids are better off with their mom and dad together.
We actually have a question on social media, Kareen. So in your opinion, based on your example of reading the partner, what role does empathy play in couple relationships?
Well, it's very important to emphasize or to define what empathy is, because in the context of communication, again, we don't listen. And my role as the psychologist of the relation is to teach active listening. And this is actually what psychologists learn in school. So basically what empathy means is that you have to be in your partner's shoes and look at his world from his perspective without being him. So things need to make sense to you, but you don't really have to agree. But they have to make sense. So this is what empathy is all about.
And validation is also very important. So give us an example of validation. How does it work?
Validation. So let's say if I'm fighting with my partner, or my partner decides to tell me that, listen, you know, I don't like that you, I'm very upset because you came home late last night. My natural tendency would be, yes, I came home late because I had work to do and I couldn't finish and you don't appreciate that and blah, blah, blah. And this will, you know, can go on forever. And my partner will withdraw because obviously the man is avoidant, most of them. Validation means is in active listening is like, okay, what I hear you say is that you feel pretty upset that I wasn't home early tonight and this made you feel bad. So actually when the partner hears that, the anger calms down. Okay. So I have nothing to fight. I'm validating, and this is where the process of differentiation starts to occur. So individuation. So I accept that this person was not okay with that. However, what is, you know, to develop this a little bit further, when those conflicts happen, there is always a story we tell ourselves. And this is what the partner needs to understand. And this is why, again, learning to listen is important. Because it's not really about me being late that actually made my partner upset. It's actually about what the partner interpreted with me being late. So here is where you start to teach the couple to understand that what they are telling themselves is actually their own story. So if I was late and my partner is upset because I was late, most probably the story he's telling himself is that I don't care about him, he's not important, he's invisible, etc. So when this is brought out in the open, then we really can very easily manage those issues. And we need to remember that this is all our childhood injuries that we are projecting onto the other person. So really conflict is not about the relation itself, it's about what we project onto the other person and what the other person projects onto us.
So how can you, if you want to give some advice to our viewers tonight, how can you become a good active listener, validate your partner, express empathy? Give us some tips to end with.
I think honestly people are going to probably maybe laugh at this, but I think they need to take a course, they need to be trained, they need to learn what relationship is all about. Now I do understand that most of the theories have been created in the West and maybe are not very much applicable here, but you really need to seek help from a professional who really knows what he's doing. Because, you know, educate yourself, seek help, talk to people. Don't wait until you are in distress to come to therapy. Because it's a process of growth. It's not, again, a process of fixing assumptions. We do this when we are dealing with depression or anxiety, yes. When we are working, you know, more on cognition, but with relationship, we're working with the emotions, we're working with wisdom, we're working with sensation, we're working with cognitions, but it has to be done through couple therapy. There is no other way.
One more question from Facebook, Kareen. Could empathy be taught, or is it an inborn trait?
No, it has to be taught.
Can you give us any tips? Or how can it be taught?
Well, how can it be taught? First of all, it's very, in order for us to, we have to be open to this concept, because most people are not. And again, this is not something we learn, because what we learn is to defend ourselves or to score a point or to want to be right, because we are listening to our fears actually when we are communicating. Empathy is really focusing on the person, is forgetting everything that has to do with us and really being actively in the present, listening in the present, in the moment, about what the other, listening, you know, about what the other person is trying to say, or listening to what the other person is trying to say, in order for us to really understand in the moment what is happening without us being in the picture. Because when we're in the picture, then it becomes about us personally.
Exactly. So I think it's also a big part of it is stopping yourself from interpreting the situation in your view and listening to your partner's view.
Exactly. Or being aware of the story that we are telling ourselves is our story. So I have my own story. The partner has his own story. Those stories, both of them are real. So so it's a paradox. They need to coexist somehow.
One last question, because there was a couple I once met, and they were 80 years old, and they had been married for 60 years. And I asked the lady, like, what's your secret? How could you go through 60 years of marriage? And she told me, turn a deaf ear. So what do you think of that advice?
Well, I think if I want to be positive about it, I think what this person and if they lasted 60 years, so probably this person has actively chosen to focus on the good things that were in the marriage and let go of the things that were not okay. So I think
easier said than done, though.
Well, yeah, but some people train themselves, and some people have this capacity to be able to actually stay focused on what's important.
Kareen, it was very insightful. Thank you for sharing your advice and experience tonight. And I think we can agree that relationships need work, constant work and maintenance, so that they move in the right direction, let's say. And I would like to end with something that I read as I was preparing for this episode, and that sort of stuck with me. And it is, give life to each other's dreams. And I really like that, and I'd like you to think about it. I don't know if you like it as well.
I love it. I love it, actually. I really do. I think it's very important to be able to decide, because when the love, when the romantic love or the hormonal part subsides, it's a cerebral decision to keep on working on the relationship.
Thank you so much
again,
Thank you for
having
me. It was a pleasure having you on the show. Of course, before you go, don't forget to like and share this episode on Facebook and to subscribe to the American Hospital's YouTube channel. Also, I would like to wish you a Merry Christmas, and I'm going to see you next week, so make sure to join us at 8:30 p.m. Dubai time. Have a good night.